So welcome, everybody, to the Martin E. Siegel Theater Center here at the Graduate Center CUNY. My name is Frank Henschke. I'm the Executive Director and Co-Director of Programs together with Alison Lyman. This is the final event of a season. It was actually, we think, a really, really great one. But this event is one we have been collaborating on for a long time, trying to make it happen. But it took a long time to make this book into the form it is. Todd London worked on it for 10 years, a decade. And as you all know, often good things really do take a time, and so much is done too fast. But this is an extraordinary work, what Todd put together, an ideal theater for an ideal city. And we are here to celebrate the work, his publication, but also to take a moment to really think about what is theater for, what are the visions, where are we now, where are we going, and learn from the past to be informed for the future. So this is a really significant and important event for us, and I hope will also be part of the memory then for New York theater scene when we think about what are we going to do in the future. And we have with us Oskar Eustis, who is going to come. He's coming a bit later and leaves a little bit earlier, but he is, as we all know, some hard worker for the theater. We have Kristen Marting, Jonathan McCrory, Rosalba, Rolon, and Mia Yu and many others here with us. I also would like to welcome the TCG, Teresa Eyring, and Terry Nemeth, and many, many others, Tom from The Living, and Antje Oegel Agency, and many, many others who I won't name all, but thank you for coming here. And I'm going to just make a little announcement. If you have a cell phone, take it out. I'll do the same and see if it's power off. No, mine is charging, I think. I don't have it, but really do take a moment, have a look if it's off. After the evening is over, we're going to have a small reception here in the room after the Q&A. If you couldn't ask all the questions you wanted to ask, I hope some of you will be able to stay, especially, of course, Todd. Then I have here the great book that came out with the help also then of TCG. Normally it's $25, which already is a sensational price for this work of 10 years, someone we all like and respect. But tonight it's just $15. So if you have looking for a gift or reading yourself, Todd will do a book signing also after the event is over. It's going to be also in here, so think about this. So again, thank you all very, very much. And Todd.
Thank you. Thanks, Frank. Hi, everybody. And thanks, Frank. Is this, can I do this? Is this good? Okay. As Frank said, this has been many years in the making, and including here. So I serve happily on the advisory board of the Siegel Theater Center. And I think Frank first asked me about doing this event when he first heard about doing the book. Here comes Oskar, come on. We're just starting. He first asked me about doing the event, I think maybe it was 25 or 30 years ago. And we kept planning it, and I kept putting him off and saying, no, not yet, soon. And so soon is now here. And we are here, and the book is here, and an amazing gathering of artists to join me in reading from it to you. And then we're going to talk a little bit about founding theaters and about inheriting theaters that have been founded by and pioneered by others. So the readings tonight and the readings that are collected in this book are essentially origin stories of the American theater. Tonight we're going to focus on New York theaters, and I'll talk a little bit about this. But first we're going to read, and then we're going to panel up a little bit and talk, and then take some questions. We're together in the City University, so I want to pay homage to a couple of other universities that participated in this project. The first is a little college in Iowa called Grinnell, where this book actually began 39 years ago when I was a freshman, so you can do the math. I don't know who's this guy. I had a teacher there, a guy named Sandy Moffett, whose offices were behind a theater that was named for a woman, Hallie Flanagan, who I had never heard of. I had no idea who she was. And in those offices, in my first months as a freshman, he gave me a couple of publications I had never seen before, being a musical theater kid. He gave me something that was then called Yale Theater and something that was just newly called The Drama Review. It had been the Tulane Drama Review. And he gave me two books that I still actually have. One was a book by a guy named Robert Pasoli. That was a book on the open theater. And the other was a book by a man named Pierre Beiner called The Living Theater, simply The Living Theater. And I kept those books, and I had no idea that someday I would put those theaters in a book of my own, but they changed my life in some way. So I want to just remark on that, and to say that this book includes Hallie Flanagan, it includes the Open Theater's Joseph Chaikin, and it includes both Julian Beck and Judith Molina from the Living Theater. I think Judith was going to be here tonight. I don't see her, but she's on the road. So I want to dedicate tonight to her, and we're going to hear a little of her diaries tonight. A little bit more about the book before we launch into it. On a literal level, it's an anthology of documents, historical documents from the 1890s to the 1980s. These include letters, manifestos, diary entries, statements of purpose, statements of desire, and what they articulate is founding visions for specific American theaters. They are the words of devoted fanatics, dreamers, hallucinators, crazies, pioneers, brilliant, spirited people who I looked to in a kind of difficult moment for me as someone who runs an arts organization, a place called New Dramatists over in 44th Street, and who I looked to for inspiration, and then I lived with them for inspiration. And so this is what came out of that. I think this is also my attempt to, this is so high. Can we put this down somehow? Is there a way? There we go. Okay, good. This is also my attempt to create an expansive family tree, both for myself, for my students, for my friends, for my colleagues, the people that we live in this American theater, and very often we don't know who our mothers and fathers were or how they did what they did to make space for us. What we owe them. And I know that was true of me, and I think about myself as that college kid who didn't know who Hallie Flanagan was, knowing that she founded the Federal Theater Project, which was possibly the most visionary theatrical project of the century, last century, and people like the Becks and so on. So I once joked that I've become one of those sort of creepy uncle types who stays up late at night trolling the genealogy websites. It's true. It's not really a joke. But what I learned in that process is something that I think I intuited, which is the history of the 20th century is in a really large part in America, a history of theaters. You know, there's always, you tell the story of artists and you tell the story of plays and you tell the story of performance styles, but especially the later half or so of the 20th century was really marked by the founding of a whole nation of theaters. And that's part of the history that I wanted to tell. The theaters themselves embody ideals and ideas, and many of those ideals are revolutionary intent. Among the revolutionary ideas is the belief that theater practice can mirror democratic practice. This is a revolutionary notion. The understanding that both shared heritage and cultural difference are at the heart of making American culture. These ideal visions celebrate passionate amateurism and virtuosic professionalism, individual talent and group genius, the political uses of theater and the spirit of art, in other words, the work of furthering social justice, and also just the joy of art for its own sake. So all told, this is a work of amateur history, which for me was really a search for inspiration. I guess what I wanted was a sense of people who were more brilliant, more passionate, more fanatical, stronger, more determined, more visionary, had more gumption and more courage, more anger and more love than myself. And this is really what I feel is contained in these this book, and I feel it now. I mean, sometimes I've actually come to the end of projects like this, and I never want to open their bindings again. Do you know? You do the work and it's over. And this is something that even tonight as we read, I know I'll be really rediscovering, because it's actually this sort of spirit or passion of these incredible people that drives it. And then I wanted to pass this on to another generation, which is where the second university comes in. This work is a kind of double collaboration. It's a collaboration with the folks at TCG, Theater Communications Group, which has been with it from the very beginning, been patient through my years. I've been patient through their years, you know, and now we have this beautiful document that they've created out of all these individual documents. But it's also a collaboration with my students at Yale, where I've been teaching this book for like the last 7 years. And I've exploited my students, you know, ruthlessly. I thank them for their contributions, because many of the pieces in here were found by students, and certainly talking with them about this work has helped me understand it. So this is a New York night, but it's not a New York book. It actually is a book that maps many corners of the country, from the rural South and the Midwest to the migrant camps of California, from the Hull House settlement house in Chicago in the late 19th century, where American art theater really began, to boardrooms in Houston, Washington, and Minneapolis. It's about the attempts to define and forge an American theater, and in a way, an American cultural identity. But tonight we're going to focus on New York and a handful of really important theaters that have sprung up here, some lasting decades and some lasting weeks or months. So this is a communal project. I'm happy to be sharing it communally tonight. I'm going to introduce everybody as they come up. And I've tried to pair our guests and colleagues with people either whom they literally inherited their theaters from, or people that they remind me of, or who I think share a sort of spirit connection. So let's start with the readings. I'm really happy to have my dear friend Kristen Marting with us. She's founder and artistic director of Here Arts Center, which, if you don't know it, is one of the most exciting homes for artists in the city. She'll be reading from a memoir by the playwright Susan Glaspell, who with her husband, George Cram Cook, and others, including ultimately Eugene O'Neill, the playwright, founded the Provincetown Players in 1915, first as a kind of dream vision in a fireplace in Greenwich Village, and then in a very real fishing wharf in Cape Cod, and then back to the vision where their passionate amateurism met with urban reality. And so this is Kristen reading from Susan Glaspell.
The last time I read something, I read Hallie Flanagan. So in this room, so I'm making a little bit of a habit of visiting these incredible women. So Susan, writers, critics, adventurers, painters, having in common a feeling that it would be better to be destroyed than not to create one's own beauty. Jig said this of the group from which the Provincetown Players came. You have the police to reckon with in creating your own beauty in New York. You have small boys who kick tin cans down McDougal Street while the curtain is up. People upstairs who put their garbage in front of the theater just as the audience is arriving. The phonograph next door. A little disheartening when finally he found a ground floor at 139 McDougal Street to learn that $200 of the $245 capital from Provincetown must be paid for putting in a steel girder, or the partition which would give the stage couldn't be torn out. When I arrived in New York, my first glimpse of Jig was standing amid shavings, lumber, and bags of cement, explaining the Provincetown Players to a policeman and an impersonal-looking person from the building department. Now here is Susan Glaspell, he said, as if I had just entered for this. She's writing plays, and there's a young Irishman, O'Neill, turning to the Irish policeman. We all went downstairs to have a drink and talk it over. Broadway. That wasn't what we wanted to do. In fact, we weren't doing this for money at all. My salary is $15 a week, said Jig. The person from the building department looked a little less impersonal as Jig talked to him of plays out of American life, quite as if this were one of the man's warm interests. The Irish policeman remained a friend to the last. I've heard Jig explain the Provincetown players to firemen, electricians, women, tenement inspectors, garbage collectors, judges. Our Italian landlady, our real estate agent, our banker were all drawn into the adventure. We're doing it for fun, Jig said to a judge. Of course, profound fun, the fun of death, for instance, the profound amusement of imagined death. He believed that the gifted amateur had possibilities which the professional may have lost. It was with an amateur group he worked in those early years, with no money. The only hold he had on them was through making them to want to do it. It was his intensity that held the thing together. And the thing it was all for, the beauty created, judging that first year by itself alone, it was not worth the struggle of making it possible. Bad acting and producing, plays there seemed little reason for giving. Sometimes it would be almost impossible to cast a play. Why then did his faith hold? Because beneath fatigue and disappointment, he believed in the thing as a whole. In a theater for experiment, you may do things which in themselves are not worth doing, yet he would feel something in that play, a thing that was on its way to something else. Why not give this boy a chance to see it in action, see how he can improve it in rehearsal? Let him know that there's a stage for the better play he can write. There ought, moreover, to be one theater for American writers to play with, one where, if the spirit moved them, they can give plays. They can give plays which are not likely to be produced elsewhere. We mean to go on giving artists of the theater a chance to work out their ideas in freedom.
So that was from Glaspell's memoir. It's entitled The Road to the Temple, and it's about Jig Cook, her husband, who died early in the 20s in Greece, where they retreated to after a few years with the players. Okay, so next, in addition to being a brilliant editor, sociologist, historian, cultural critic, activist, Pan-Africanist, and founder, including of the NAACP, W.E.B. Du Bois was a playwright and a founder of a theater in Harlem that lasted well less than a year. Harlem-based artist, producer, one of the founders of the Movement Theater Company and the director of theater programming at the National Black Theater, all in Harlem, is Jonathan McCrory, and he's here. And he's one of the most extraordinary young artistic leaders I've met in a long time. And he's here to read from a 1926 piece by Du Bois from the NAACP's journal, which was called The Crisis, and which Du Bois edited for 24 years. So here's Jonathan.
Well, I have to live up to all of that, right?
And Du Bois.
And Du Bois, yes. Yeah. Today, as the renaissance of arts comes among American Negroes, the theater calls for a new birth. But most people do not realize just where the novelty must come in. The Negro is already in theater and has been there for a long time, but his place there is not thoroughly normal. His audience is mainly a white audience, and the Negro actor has, for a long time, been asked to entertain this more or less alien group. The demands and the ideals of a white group and their conception of Negroes have set the norm for the black actor. He has been the minstrel, the comedian, the singer, the lay figure of all sort. Only recently has he become tentatively to emerge as the ordinary human being with everyday reactions. And here he is still handicapped and put forth with much hesitation, as in the case of the nigger, Lully Bell, and the Emperor Jones. And all this development naturally, then, the best of the Negro actor and the most poignant Negro drama have yet to be called for. This could be evoked only by the Negro audience desiring to see its own life depicted in its own writers and actors. For this reason, the new Negro theater is demanded to and is slowly coming. It, however, needs guiding light. The movement, which has begun this year in Harlem, New York City, lays down 4 fundamental principles. The plays for a real Negro theater must be, 1, about us. That is, they must have plot which reveal Negro life as it is. 2, by us. That is, they must be written by Negro authors who understand from birth and continual association just what it is to be a Negro today. 3, for us. That is, the theater must cater primarily to a Negro audience and be supported and sustained by their entertainment and approval. 4, near us. The theater must be in a Negro neighborhood near the masses of ordinary people. Only in this way can a real folk play movement of American Negroes be built. The Killer Group Players' Little Negro Theater is a free stage. It has been equipped by the joint effort of Public Theater Library and players. It will be further decorated by colored artists. Any who has a play or any group which wishes to give a play is invited to use the playhouse under certain easy conditions which the library and the players will formulate. We hope by plays, lectures, and informal social gatherings to make this room a place for wide inspiration for all dark people everywhere and for their friends.
It's interesting, that's 1926, and 41 years later, Douglas Turner Ward wrote a piece in the New York Times called For Whites Only about the theater, in which he calls for about the screaming need for a sufficient audience of other Negroes to understand what black writers are up to. And it's actually the same call. It's really remarkable. But that was then. He says facetiously. I want to read a little bit of Harold Clurman. But let me tell you a story first that I remembered. So at the Krigwa Players that Du Bois is talking about, they gave an award, a playwriting award, and the first winner of the award was a woman named Eulalie Spence, who was an actress and a playwright. And I forget the name of her play, but years later, she became Joseph Papp's speech coach to help him scrub the Brooklyn out of his mouth. Okay, so Harold Clurman made a career out of inspiring others, and it's often said that he talked the group theater into being. The group theater, which lasted only 10 years, starting in 1930, became arguably one of the most influential American theaters of the 20th century. This is a little piece from Clurman's The Fervent Years. It was Cheryl Crawford, another founder of the group theater, who now urged me to prepare for the future by seeking actors who might be selected for our permanent company. I would talk to them, excite their enthusiasm, and generate the momentum that would transform what had been a somewhat vague program into a going concern. The first meeting was held in my room at the Hotel Maurice on West 58th Street in November 1930. Since my room was too small, later meetings were held at Miss Crawford's apartment on West 47th Street, and when her apartment became too crowded, owing to the increasing number of people who showed up, we repaired to a large room at Steinway Hall, which some friend of a friend provided without cost. These meetings, held every Friday night at 11:30, continued from November till May 1931, with hardly an interruption from week to week. A curious thing happened from the first. Instead of telling the prospective actors of our theater and what advantages would accrue to them through an association with us, that we believed in a permanent company which would guarantee them continuity of work and consequently security of livelihood, that we believed in developing the actor, not merely hiring him. thus ensuring greater versatility. Instead of all this, which would have been eminently to the point, I chose an almost metaphysical line which led away from matters of theater. My approach emphasized the theater's reason for being. New technical methods, no matter how intriguing of themselves, had a very minor value unless they were related to content that was humanly valuable. A technique of the theater had to be founded on life values. The whole bent of our theater, I reiterated time and again, would be to combine a study of theater craft with a creative content which that craft was to express. To put it another way, our interest in the life of our times must lead us to the discovery of those methods that would most truly convey this life through the theater. If man was to be the measure of all things in our theater, if life was the starting point and an effect on life the aim of our effort, then one had to have a point of view in relation to it. One had to define an approach that might be common to all members of the group. It was this that added a dimension to the talks and to the whole atmosphere around the group that was to become its distinguishing mark, its strength, its impediment, and its wound. Certain it is that there was added to all the technical discussion of the actor, the director, the scene designer, the audience, and the problems of casting and administration, a new note, an attitude that lifted these subjects from the realm of narrow craft to that of general concern with our lives and the lives of our times. Of the founding of the Living Theater in 1947, believe it or not, Julian Beck wrote, "In anger we began." But the history of the Living Theater reads to me like a founding out of love. Love of theater and art, love of peace, love of a man and a woman, and love for a transformative vision of our humanity. That history, that ceaseless dedication, is now nearly 67 years old. Here's the remarkable Rosalba Rolon from Pregones Theater in the Bronx, which has recently merged with the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, and she's going to read from the Diaries of Judith Molina.
September 9th, 1951. We work to capacity on the theater, death or glory. Now we move ahead. On the Living Theater letterhead, all the news is clearly printed in gray ink. Dr. Faustus delights in darkness and luminosity, the task like the text, too clear and yet too obscure. September 17th, 1951, work. Each day now a work day. In the subway, Julian and I sit across from a thin, ascetic man dressed like a worker, clothes neat but soiled, as from a hard day's work and monstrous, hideous feet. I fantasize the taking of a vow, perhaps 25 years ago, not to wash his feet or remove the shoes that he was then wearing. The filth-coated feet are grown thick with sores, swollen and hoof-like. The decaying shoes have merged with the skin which emits a gruesome, sickly odor. We did not leave the train. We felt bound not to. October 3rd, 1951. In synagogue, I think during the silences, which I no longer fill with prayer. It is necessary to be detached, stoic, distant. The problem is how to be detached and still do what is necessary. To act with detachment when detachment contradicts to act. Karma Yoga says, action without fruits. October 5th, 1951. The cherry lane is charged with unnameable energies. I walk through webs of tensions and networks of danger. Memory and desire catch me across the entrance to Commerce Street, permeated with the recollections of many loves. October 8, 1951. Sometimes I'm frightened by the amount of work involved. No one can know how much we do in 1 hour or how Julian and I plan our minutes. October 10th, 1951. Many problems. We shall have to raise 6 months' rent for the theater and pay for license fees, violations, water, financial woes. Julian on edge. October 21st, 1951. Casting. Faustus proves a problematical man to cast. We do, we will, we must. October 22nd, 1951. Work on directing the book. Much freedom within the text, no stage directions to Einstein. Various printers, Trouba's little broken down press for our tickets and stationery, and a fancy printer who does work for Kenneth Patchen and other touchy jobs for the announcements. October 23rd, 1951. We have seen at least 350 actors, not a moment's quiet. We eat in their presence, still not Dr. Faustus, no Margaret Ida. October 25th, 1951. How a landscape can blacken, all light eclipse, all sun hopes vanish. How swiftly what was a garden is wilderness. The pressures of the theater sustain me. My obligations steady me. October 27, 1951. The play is cast. Rehearsals. I feel this play under me. I can take its pulse act by act, scene by scene. I can move it, hasten it, slow it. I may do a good job on it. The cast believes in the play and the work of the theater. Donald Mary's an extraordinary actor. Equity makes things difficult for us. 3 of our actors are union members. Equity will try to force these people to leave the cast. We had a long, disagreeable talk with Willard Swire, who is in charge of Off-Broadway and the Equity Office. Equity shows total ignorance of the possibility of a theater not based on the financial standards of Broadway. Their demands, and even more so the demands of the craft unions, are impossible to meet. Equity dictates that we must hire 5 actors who are union members or no union members at all. We do not know what to do. The actors want to appeal to Equity Council. The hardest days are now. 2 lost journals, written during the period November 1st to December 21st, 1951. During this time, the Living Theater opened at the Cherry Lane Theater with Dr. Faustus lights and Liza lights on December 2nd, and began rehearsals for the second production, Beyond the Mountains. Despite the satisfaction which the work gave me, it was an unhappy and alienated period. It is lost time, since I think of the journal as time held captive. All I have left to record the opening of our theater is a letter.
The story of the founding of the New York Shakespeare Festival in 1954 is beyond mythic. A series of Olympian battles fought by a David-turned Colossus named Joseph Papp. I'm thrilled to have the current artistic director of the public here to read from an article by Papp that appeared in the New York Herald Tribune in March 1958. It was a response to the critic Walter Kerr's suggestion that Papp charge admission for his Shakespeare productions. Here's Oskar Eustis.
I am trying to build our theater on the bedrock of municipal and civic responsibility, not on the quicksands of show business economics. I am interested in a popular theater, not a theater for the few. I am interested in establishing a classical repertory company with a guaranteed annual wage for performers. This is impossible under the present conditions on or off Broadway. We are not ready to adopt the point of view that, human nature being what it is, people must be made to pay for something to appreciate it. A theater will create its own respect on stage. How many plays have we seen for which we have paid lots of money and disliked? Much less appreciated. In fact, it was worse when you paid for it. The only practical means of ensuring the permanence of our theater is to tie it in with civic responsibility. The public library, an institution for enlightenment and entertainment, is a case in point. No charge is made for books. If people had to pay, most of the books would gather dust on the shelves. I know that if I had to pay for books at the Williamsburg Public Library, it is doubtful that I would have read the plays of Shakespeare. I see the Shakespeare Festival in the category of public recreation and public education, not show business. A business must stay out of the red to exist. Recreation and education do not and should not have to live this way. There are free museums, free public concerts. Our school system pays out money every day, which is, quote, spent immediately and is gone forever, unquote. And no other conceivable income is envisioned. Financial crises appear regularly. Nobody suggests that the schools be offered half free. Insufficient funds was never a basis for attacking the principle of free and universal education. This makes me so sad to read that.
I know, right?
I mean, it's just, he couldn't imagine how bad it was going to get. A theater, like education, has the function of disseminating ideas and values. Nobody expects any more from the money going into education than that it helps to put something useful into the head of some boy or girl. By establishing our theater as an essential part of the cultural life of the people, we ensure stability. In democracy, public and private enterprise exist side by side. I believe that in a city the size of New York, and in a city where most of the people have yet to see a live professional production, it is of the utmost importance to have a public theater, a theater for everybody, yes, everybody, for those who can afford it and those who cannot. We accept the responsibility that goes with asking for support to turn out plays of worth on the highest artistic level. I believe in bringing the youth to the theater through the schools, churches, and community organizations. I believe in the theater as a vital cultural force necessary to help in the spiritual guidance of our people.
I believe that we've just been joined by the woman this evening is dedicated to, Judith Molina. The playwright Maria Irene Fornes once said that Ellen Stewart is like a mad woman who held a piece of junk in her hand and said it was pure gold. And in 5 years, it was pure gold. 52 years have passed since Ellen Stewart performed her earliest acts of junk alchemy, and the theater she founded, La Mama, is still magic. Mia Yu worked for Ellen Stewart for 16 years before becoming her co-artistic director in 2009 and her successor in 2011. And in that short time, she's shown that the spirit of La Mama lives on. Here's Mia Yu.
How it all began. I came to New York in 1950. I came from Chicago to go to Trapphagen Fashion Institute. Colored people couldn't go to a school like that in Chicago. I was supposed to meet a friend who lived in New York. 2 Chicago friends had come along with me. We waited at Grand Central under the clock, but my friend never showed up. I had only $60. I didn't want to tell anyone in Chicago what had happened. My friends left New York, but I was too proud to go back home. I had to find a job. I got lost and went into St. Patrick's. I didn't know it was St. Patrick's then. I lit a candle and asked for a job. 30 minutes later, I had one. I was to be a porter at Saks. Sundays, I'd get on the subway and go anywhere, exploring the city wherever I got off the train. One Sunday, I discovered Delancey Street and all those little shops with clothes and fabric. I wanted to be a dress designer, and there was all this wonderful fabric. You could look at anything you liked. You could try things on. No one said anything to you. And this little man, my Papa Diamond, came out of this shop. I'm sorry. He was wearing a little black cap on his head. It's been a long time. He tried to sell me some fabric. I told him I had no money. He said, "Come inside. Maybe you'll see something you like better." Finally, he understood. I really hadn't a cent. Also, that I hadn't anybody, no family in New York. It was love at first sight. My Papa Abraham Diamond. He adopted me on the spot. I became the artist's daughter. Every Sunday, I'd come and spend the day with his family. When I left, he gave me a piece of fabric in a package. I'd open it when I got home. I had a little sewing machine in my room. Every week, I'd make a dress or an outfit and wear it on the following Sunday. He'd showed me all around the street, his daughter, the designer. Now at Saks Fifth Avenue, the colored had to wear smocks at work. The white didn't. So there I was, like Cinderella under my smock. It all happened very fast. I come to Saks in May. With the interest in my little homemade clothes, by August, I was one of the executive designers. I designed for 8 years, and I never got to design school at all. In the meantime, my Papa Diamond told me that when he came to New York from Romania at age 11, he was the first to put out a pushcart in the Delancey Street area. He said, I should have a pushcart too. And if I pushed the pushcart for other people, it would take me where I wanted to go. Then I got very sick. I had many operations. I didn't know if I was going to live. I went to Morocco. My Papa Diamond came to me in a vision and told me to get my pushcart. So I left Morocco to return to New York. I decided my pushcart would be a little theater where my brother Fred Leitz and Paul Foster could have their plays performed. That's exactly what I did. And that's why La Mama is often referred to as a pushcart. I feel very strongly that someday we will have to do more than just say hello to other people. There has to be a visceral understanding among men, not just a greeting. So I try to use La Mama as a pushcart to help push us in that direction.
So I want to close out the readings part, and then we'll talk. At the end of the reading Rosalba did of Judith Molina's Diaries, she mentioned the letter that she had from the lost period after the opening of the Gertrude Stein play. I'd like you to read to you this letter. It's remarkable. It's from an American poet. December 15th, 1951. My dears Julian Beck and Judith Molina, I am walking in a dream, the aftermath of what I saw and heard at your Cherry Lane Theater last evening in all that snow. I'd be in there tonight if I didn't have a firm grip on myself. If I were younger, nothing could hold me back. I belong there tonight, but I dare not let myself go. And tonight is the last night of your play of Gertrude Stein's Dr. Faustus Lights the Lights. To me, it was a truly wonderful experience to have witnessed it. I want to tell you everything at once about the excellently chosen cast, the evenness of their performance, the way they kept the interest up among them, as well as the integrity of their individual performances. I was thrilled. But there was something else that overshadowed all that. It concerned the stage itself, the overall conception of the play as something elevated, as pure entertainment, as something so well sustained, so far above the level of commercial theater that I tremble to think it might fade and disappear. I swear it lives in a different air from the ordinary Broadway show. It is as fresh as a day in the country, the first really serious, really cleanly written, produced and acted play that I have seen, well, in a long time. I say I feel as if it was something that someone were going to snatch away from before my eyes. That is one reason I am so driven to go again tonight. I can't believe it possible that the cast in those parts, just as they were acted, is going to be dispersed. I don't trust my contemporaries. Such a beautiful thing, such a truly entrancing experience. It's going to be let die without anyone having adequately celebrated it. I want you to know that as long as I live, I'll never forget it. I realize that I'm speaking in hyperboles. I'm doing it of a set purpose. If I did not use that figure, I could not show you how far above the usual conception of the stage you have set your mark and how I appreciate it. It's an almost impossible shot, but you've succeeded in communicating to me what you all together as a company have set yourselves. And I want you to know and never to forget that you have succeeded. You have succeeded, and it is important. I do not want you to forget, any of you, that you did communicate to me the elevated achievement you had in mind when you first conceived such a theater as you placed before your audience last night. I don't know whether you'll succeed in the fiercely competitive field which the New York theater represents. There is a sordidness which corrupts playwright, producer, and actor alike, which somehow, and sad to relate, brings in the coin while it strangles the entire range of what is offered. We all know this vulgarity. We all detest it. The only protest we make is to stay away from the performances, but there are plenty that go, and the appearance of success is achieved. I want to tell you that everywhere people are conscious of this state of affairs, that they long for something more satisfying to their sensibilities than these fifth-rate appeals to their emotions and intelligence represent. You are young and apparently incorruptible. You know that there is a whole range of plays, not just Ibsen repertoire, waiting to be created for a public, actually to be created. And if you maintain yourself by the skin of your teeth, writers will write more plays for you, poetic plays, excellent plays, the plays that an enlightened audience calls or will call for. I can't tell you how important it is for the theater that you want to create new plays. It is the most thrilling thing that can be done on the stage today. I wish I could give you $1 million to start at once on your plans to build a theater housed in the walls of a brownstone. I can't do it. But to begin with, you've got the thing, the practical energy to have made a beginning at the Cherry Lane. May all success be yours. Sincerely, William Carlos Williams. We're going to talk a little bit about foundings and inheritances. Oskar, I just want to check in with you about your time, because I know you have to leave.
Yeah, but I'm okay for about 20 minutes.
Oh, for about 20 minutes. Okay, great. So let me then start with some of you who have actually founded theaters, you know.
You have to take the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm talking this.
It's also recording it, yeah.
Oh, okay, good. So I want to start with some of the founders. All three of these people have actually started their own theaters. Rosalba, can I start with you? Can you tell me a little bit about... yeah, I'll give... Oh, you want to use that one?
Thank you.
About the impulses for founding Pregones. What was missing? What were you looking for?
Well, we were young. We wanted to, 34 years ago, I wanted to travel, wanted to be nomads, and didn't want to be bound to a specific place. There was an amazing surge in Latino theater at the time, including the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, which by Miriam Colon founded, and who is, you know, as life goes, we're merging with and inheriting now. So it's, but at that time, you know, and for all these years, it was the anchor for us and the one thing that we wanted to be when we grew up. And so, but we really wanted to model our work as after the popular theater, Latin American Teatro Popular, popular theater, street theater, guerrilla theater, and very political, very out there. And so the Latino theater, you know, at the time, so had these very, very steady spaces and theaters and places, and that was just not part of that mix, and we felt that we could fill that gap. And it was so also Manhattan-centric. We wanted to go to places. We wanted to go to places where people didn't have to leave home to go to Manhattan to see theater. We love Manhattan, and now we have the theater in Manhattan, so second stage. But in general, it was about going out into communities and going to very non-conventional places. So we began by playing in churches and hallways on the street and big theaters and small theaters. We just wanted really touring company. So it took about after 7 years, we finally settled, after we began to feel that we needed sort of a very steady area in which to work, and we had been working in the Bronx for so long, but we had by then toured most of the country and parts of the world, and we felt that it was that time, but never really thinking of having a space until it became, I guess, we matured and began to feel that we needed a roof over our heads. So, but that was, and it was an ensemble then, it's an ensemble now. We've transitioned from being ensemble-driven to ensemble-led, and I didn't do it alone. I don't think no one ever does it alone, in a way, so.
Did you pick your neighborhood, or did your neighborhood pick you? How did that happen?
It picked us. Every time we had, for a while, worked in our El Barrio in East Harlem and the Lower East Side, and, sort of like anchored it in our root communities, at the time, and which have changed since quite a bit. And in the Bronx, we were just working with very, very involved with community organizations that kept on bringing us back. And then you begin to establish sort of a really visceral, organic relationship with that in a way that eventually you don't see yourself anywhere else but there. And of course, most of us, I think, in the company right now live in the Bronx as well. So it was just one of those very sort of organic things that happened. It was not a switch that you say, oh, I'm going there. And eventually, though, we did become intentional in selecting which parts of our South Bronx neighborhood we really wanted to establish our roots in. And so because we see ourselves as having these deep roots and very broad wings, so we were thinking of that kind of connection. And so we've been there ever since. Now we have, of course, our beautiful theater. Please all come to the Bronx, Walton Avenue, 149th Street.
Did you? I just want to stay with you for 1 minute. Did you think that this activity would sustain you? Did you think of it as a theater, or did you think of it as a set of energies, activities, engagements?
Yes. Well, as you grow, you begin to feel that you have this responsibility to yourselves and to the artists that you have, in a way, convinced to come into the family, and we began to see ourselves as a real potential for a home in which we could all grow and prosper. Financially, in a way, whatever that means, but mostly in terms of our repertoire, our growth, artistic growth, and it was mostly a question as to what it is that we're providing every artist that sort of comes into our world. What is it that we're, doing for this group and for ourselves? And then other realities set in, and some of us were more business savvy than others, and began to think, well, wait a minute, now we have to find a viable way to sustain our work. And that viability had to do with infrastructure and business development and all of those ugly things that we don't like to think about, but that eventually became a standard for us, and we began to respect it more, respect the fact that we did have the responsibility to create a solid theater business for our artists and for our audience, because they deserved some steadiness in the cultural landscape, in our case, in the Bronx.
But you've continued to tour
Yes.
and perform elsewhere as well, right?
Yes, we do. We have a strong international program. We're in partnership with 5 other countries via the Carousel Project. It is a wonderful, amazing way in which we co-create together between 5 countries over the internet and get together every couple of years to explore new options and new projects.
That's great. I want to come back to the merger with Puerto Rico and traveling in a minute. So Kristin, as I recall, the founding of Here Arts is actually multiple foundings and also a merger.
Yes.
Can you sort of track that out a little?
Yeah. So originally, I was a young director along with a few others, and we finished at NYU, and we didn't want to assistant direct and go the route of working for other people for a lot of years, so we decided to found a director's company. And we did 5 seasons of picking directors and saying, hey, do you want to come direct something, instead of picking playwrights? And then we thought it was a great idea for us. We were spending $30,000 a year for space, which seemed like a lot of money. And we were like, hey, why don't we have our own space? We could, have even more space for just $30,000. And we decided to get together with another company, to found Here. And they were more focused on playwrights and performers, and we were still very focused on directors, so it seemed like a great fit. And we were interested in including other disciplines. So we wanted to have a space that had different kind of theaters within it. We wanted it to be a place where people could gather, so we wanted to have a cafe in it, and to have a gallery so the visual arts could be part of it. So we got interested in kind of making a home, and originally it was supposed to be smaller, but we kept finding spaces that we really liked that were larger, and so we found here. And we started as two separate companies. We brought a bunch of other companies in to be guests in our home for an ongoing time. And then we found that actually it was very confusing to people that there was here and there was home and there was Tiny Mythic, as well as a bunch of other companies. And we folded into one artistic entity, and we had a New Orleans-style funeral parade where we buried home and Tiny Mythic, and we celebrated the birth of Here. And so Here's been around for 20 years now, and we still are a home for artists, and we're very focused on hybrid work, which I think really grew out of that interest in supporting different disciplines in the space. And so the visual artists started talking to the theater artists, started talking to the musicians, and so all of these pieces started to get cooked in the space that we're thinking about that. And we got interested in long-term residencies for artists as a way, instead of just being a venue or being our two companies independently producing work, figuring out a way to create a way for artists to talk to each other as they were making work. And so we formed our residency program now about 15 years ago. So it's been 15 of the 20 years of Here's Life that we've done these residencies for 2 to 3 years with hybrid artists.
So, there's something about doing this work which is really about family histories. So in your family, you're the one who's survived, right?
Well, not exactly. We're still around.
No, but at that theater, so the leadership of Home for Contemporary Art, which it was called, have gone on to other things.
Barbara's still involved as the four founders were Barbara Busacchino, Randy Rollison, and Tim Maynor. Tim still serves on Here's board. He was with me with Tiny Mythic. Barbara and Randy were home together. And Barbara's still involved with our puppetry program. So she still works closely with Basil Twist, who's the artistic director of our puppetry program. And Barbara is the producer that works with him outside of Here, but also works at Here still on a part-time basis with the puppetry work.
So how did that all...
And Randy moved away.
And Randy moved and runs a theater in Cincinnati,
now,
right? Yeah. Cleveland.
Not in Cleveland anymore. Now he's in San Francisco.
Oh, now he's in San Francisco. So how does that, and over how long does that happen? I mean, there's so many sort of organisms in there to form this ultimate organism.
There were. I mean, we ran non-hierarchically with 6 of us for a few years. And then people asked me to become executive director because it felt like I was doing that job, but I just didn't have that title. And it was very, we made a lot of great decisions that way, but it's a very long process to do things by consensus with that large a group of people. And we also had a lot of cash flow challenges because we opened the place like with $245, pretty much, like what you had me read. So then after a few years of me being executive director, I really wanted to have more time to direct outside of Here, as well as continuing to direct within Here. But also, I really wanted to work more with the artists and not wear as many hats. So happily, I've had Kim Whitener as the producing director of Here for about 7 years now as my partner in the space.
Rosalba, did you guys move away from consensus to a more structured staff?
We in a way we did. I mean, it went from the collectivo, from the collective sort of mode of decision making to a more structured. But that happened early on. I do believe that there is a misconception that an ensemble does not have a structure. An ensemble does have a structure, and it does have a methodology. And we are all clear. We're a group of designers, musicians, composers, actors, directors. It's a real melange of roles, and they fall naturally into place once the process begins. Now, of course, it's more formal. We have some of our staff members here. We have, it gets more complicated as time goes by, but yes.
So I have a lot of questions, but I want to get to Oskar before he leaves. And so, Jonathan, I'm going to skip over you for a minute. So your situation is very different. We're going to get, because you have this giant sitting in your office with you, figuratively speaking, Joe Papp. There have been There have been 2 other artistic leaders there since PAP. What's the question? The question is, what are the advantages of having that history and that legacy, and what are the things that are burdensome about it?
There's nothing at all burdensome. I'm very fortunate to run a theater whose principles and mission I believe in entirely.